Lincoln is a great school. It's an urban high school here in the heart of Silicon Valley. Most of our students don't have parents in tech.
Parents don't know how to encourage their kids. They may believe that their kid can't access those opportunities, or they may not know that the opportunity exists.
There's so many job openings that we don't even have the people to fill them. Why can't we homegrown our students to be tech ready? We need to be in that race. It is challenging to start a new computer science class. You know, teachers are very busy, and having a partnership with TILS, it made it a much smoother transition. Having people from the high-tech industry come to your classroom teaching content and concepts of computer science made it much easier.
I brought my brother into robotics because there's not enough opportunities at his middle school. Technology has changed me. It's made my technical communication, presentation, and my leadership skills better.
We want to make a better world for all students and give them all the opportunities that they can get. And if the technology is where they are meant to be and they simply don't have access to it, that is a tragedy.
As teachers, we need to prepare our students so that they're career ready.
All right, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where in the world you are watching this from. My name is Ty Crockett, and today we're going to have a panel of people from our industry talking about the transition from projects to products. Like, how do we do this? Where are we going? How's this work? What's the effectiveness? And what does it look like it's going to be? We always think that at least we used to think that we do a project, we feel really good about it, we'd be done, but the world is changing in such a way that that's just not enough anymore. We don't get to be done. Our markets don't allow us to, and our competitors in the market, and they are not that kind to us to let us just be done and have it be done with. So we're going to be talking about this transition from projects to products. So I have a panel with me today. My panel consists of Christy Alviero, Chris Sheridan, and Maggie Schoonover. I first met Christy Alviero a long time ago at a healthcare company that we worked at together. Today, she's a COO of Iogo, a company that does tax and accounting software. And she's worked in a lot of different positions over time to get her to be in this position where she's able to run her own company. And I hope you guys can go and check it out. My son used her product this year, and we had a little funny story where we were. I was trying to tell him, hey, let me show you how to do this. Let me show you how to do these different things. And he's like, Dad, it's easy. I got it. Took him less than 3 minutes to do his taxes. It's kind of cool. All right. Next, I'm going to have Chris Sheridan, who I met recently. And I met him in having some discussions about how products are managed. And I was simply amazed at his way of looking at the analytics of a product and how you know you're winning when it comes to the management of a product. So Chris is the group product manager for Zix Corp, a company that deals with security up and down the technical stack. So I hope you can get some of the insights from him as far as how he deals with product management and that sort. I was really amazed because so often product owners and product managers come up through different ranks, especially in technology companies, of maybe as project management that got him there. Chris had a sales background, and his ability to look at stuff in a very different way was something that was really amazing to me. And then finally, our last panelist is Maggie Schoonover, who is the CEO and co-founder of the company Smash Dev Shop. They're in Wichita, and they service the Midwest when it comes to technology consulting and technology building. And so I've met her a few years ago in a Scrum class, actually. She was wanting to understand how to better leverage different ways of work to help her own company. She teaches the master's and undergrad program for agility at Wichita State University. So she's actually furthering that thing right after high school, furthering that place where people can still learn to invest in technology and better ways of work. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into the stuff that we're going to talk to and get us started. We're going to do some questions with the group, and then we'll try to leave a lot of space for the audience to put forth their questions. I don't want it to just be mine. I'd like for it to be the group's. I'm going to start with one that's, I guess it's really big. Christy, I'm going to direct this one at you if you're cool with it. And then as you guys want, just jump in and start talking and tell us how you feel about this. In a world where the definition of a product keeps changing, how do you define product right now? How are you dealing with that?
Great question. We are definitely in times where technology evolves very quickly, which therefore changes what people want or what they need. A good example, that's the iPhone, or before the iPhone, having a camera was a nice to have. Now it's a necessity. Then the iPhone came out, and having apps and web browsers was a nice to have. And it became a necessity. Nobody's going to buy a phone without those basic things. So there's constantly the evolution of what people want. And so that's the fun challenge of a product manager, is to understand and, that you never have this done product. It's never completely wrapped up in a bow and ship it and lay off the development staff and you're done, because it's only going to last for so long before you're going to have customers that want something new, or you're going to have a competitor that does the same thing but better and faster. And so that's something that, with our first product that we launched, TurboTax, is everyone's, well, there's TurboTax, there's H&R Block Online. And yes, there is, but we found a way to make the process faster, where most taxpayers can file in 10 minutes or less, which was something that they couldn't do. But we didn't stop there. We also learned that we had a very niche customer, but we wanted to be able to support more customers. So we pivoted a little bit this year and rolled out yet another expansion of being able to virtually help someone with their tax preparation, not require them to do it themselves. We still know that we can't handle every taxpayer, and that there are some that, you just need to go visit someone in the office and they can sit you down and help you. And we're not the solution for you, but we do try to be a solution for most, and we listen to our customers, and we continue to make changes to make the product better. And we're always looking for new ways to expand it, to make it to be better than what it is from the first day we launched it.
What about the others? Like, how are you guys defining products now, that, especially with other organizations and other innovators, changing what it means to be a product every day?
I can speak to that a little bit. I thought it was interesting that Christy mentioned that you don't just build a product once, then lay off the dev team and then move on. So in my case, Smash Dev is a services-based company. So in our case, our company is the product, and the services that we offer are aspects of the product or features of the product. And it was as a result of needing to pivot, actually, and learning that like project to project work doesn't scale. Like, it doesn't create a sustainable company. It's hard to make money that way. And so we did a lot of internal education is like, why isn't this working? You know, at least in our case, and for other people that I've met who work in like a services based, especially like a dev shop based environment, it usually starts out with, you know, you do a lot of freelance work or you have some project work that you do for people and then you move on. But that wasn't good for our company, nor was it good for our clients. And so once we kind of pivoted and said, like, we are a product company, or in that we build, you know, enterprise level software, we are a partner with you, mean you can, you know, hire your own developers or help us, or let us help you hire your own developers, but you don't, like, we don't just go away kind of thing.
Yeah.
That pivot was really important for us. And we've grown our long-term clients significantly as a result of focusing on the product and in the best interest of our clients, their products, instead of just trying to turn as many projects as possible in a single year.
I've noticed that
it's an area that's really interesting for me, and I'll piggyback off of your cell phone analogy. I think the pivot to products from projects is important, but one of the fears that I see a lot of product managers and product owners and product people getting sucked into is that we're building a roadmap based on competitive pressure or competitive parity more so than looking at a problem holistically and really getting down into, is this a market that we should play in? So the iPhone's a great example where if I'm every other cell phone manufacturer on the planet, I'm most likely recognizing that I'm not going to be able to do what Apple does. And so I really like when companies take a unique approach to a market and find a niche where they can be successful. And a great example would be like Voca, for example, in the cell phone space, where 99% of people won't know who Voca is, but the 1 to 5% who do are the senior citizens that they build phones for and that they don't have any cameras on, right? So where a product manager would look at that market and say, well, you have to have a camera on a phone, a really, really good product manager might look at the market problem and say, there are all these cameras on these phones, but there's this group of people that instead of a camera needs a touchpad that less oily skin can interact with. And so that's where I'm going to focus our innovation so that I can differentiate. So I think it's really important as we do shift to a product mindset that we really maintain that products are just solutions to problems. And so it's really a shift to a problem mindset.
Yeah. When I'm teaching classes, I often will tell people, like, we will talk about company vision, we'll get down to business strategy on how we're going to go and head towards that visionary concept. And then we state, like, products are no more than tools in your business strategy, and we should let them be that thing. We name ourselves product managers. We have roles called product owners, and people get really associated. Maybe when their product should leave, they don't want it to because their title is attached to that. My value is attached to that. And I don't have a really good way of seeing that I'm winning. Like, sometimes the concept of a product mindset may not be enough. It's about the value proposition. And really we need to know, to understand whether that's valuable or not, we know how we're winning. So what I want to throw at you, Chris, is how do you know you're winning in a product world?
Yeah, and it's a really, really good question. And it's especially difficult as you look at portfolio management, not just product management, because you'll have some products that are your revenue engines that are driving your profit margins that'll eventually allow you to invest in the next generation of products. But those are going to have two completely different goal sets. And so the first thing is, if you've got a portfolio of products and not just a single product that you build, is you need to set clearly defined goals for each product area based on what the strategic intent of that product is. So a good example might be that if I am Zix, for example, our encryption product is our flagship offering. And so perhaps a better KPI for our encryption product might be retention or profit maximization as opposed to concurrent annual growth rate, right? But in my category, managing a product team with the emerging markets, we should probably care less about profitability. We should probably not care as much about retention. And our primary focus should be net new logos, net new trials, things like that, that's driving net new growth for that business line. So I think the first thing is getting with your business leaders that drive strategy, that own the financial success of the company, and ensuring that your key performance indicators are tightly aligned to what the independent goal of that product area is in the perspective of the entire portfolio of products that you guys go to market with. And then I think in addition to that, what allows me to really know that our product is being successful is that every iteration that we build, every investment that we make, whether it's an R&D investment or a sales and marketing investment, has a very quantifiable goal that everyone in the business that's working on that project understands, and they understand their role and how they'll be able to help us achieve that goal. So I think it's not only defining KPIs really, really well and making sure they're hyper specific to that area, but it's also when you're working with all of your cross-functional partners to realize every iteration success or every project. I hate to use the word project when we're talking about converting into products, but every effort's success. Yeah. It's critical to be, I think, communicative and make sure everyone buys into it and understands how they'll be able to have efficacy on realizing whatever that goal is.
Yeah, and I agree with Chris that whole cross-functional efforts, that you've got to really have that unity. Very oftentimes, sales has one goal, marketing has another goal, the product team has their own goal. Even I've worked in organizations where QA has their own goals separate from product, separate from development, and it's very, very challenging to be successful in that way. So working with the leadership across, the board that manages all those different functions is critical to a success of any project or product.
A couple of you have worked as Scrum product owners before. Tell me how you are able to transition from that project management mindset into a product mindset while being that product owner.
So we work with a lot of startups and small companies wanting to scale up, and so for me, it was actually very liberating to transition from project management mindset to product ownership, because a lot of times was the project management mindset that I was exposed to. These small companies are like, well, I have this budget, I want all this done, and I need it done by this date because I decided that's when I wanted it released. And so I'm going to go find a dev shop to go build this for me, and everything will be awesome. Well, when you actually accept contracts like that, you're setting your own company, your own team up for failure, and likely you're going to have a very disappointed client. So to transition to a product mindset was actually liberating for me, because I don't have to have all the answers. I just have to know how to get them. And then this idea of, especially within Scrum, self-organizing teams, like kind of pushing the appropriate decisions of like, how should this be built back onto the development team? Why are we doing this? Like, you have those conversations with your stakeholders. And so I now feel more like, I don't know, I'm just kind of like pulling a lot of strings rather than just like trying to hold like the whole world on your shoulders. As a project manager, that's how I usually felt. And so for me, it was, once you get a taste of like being able to like actually affect some change by just being responsible and how you spend your time and other people's time, was very addicting. So once I got started, it just kept going.
Yeah, I started smiling as you were talking about we're setting ourselves up for failure by taking on a contract like that. In a previous life, I had no business starting a software startup company because I had no technical background, but I did anyways. And so the first thing we did was figure out, where are we going to offshore this, right? And with what third party? And I would attribute the success of that startup, as small as it was, to the dev partners that we found were of that mindset. And they said, look, this is not a project budget. I want an annual operating budget to work on improving this solution continuously. That'll be successful. But if you give me just a blanket amount of money to solve this issue, and then we stop, and then it's about you proving it in the market, you will fail. And sure enough, I bought into that model. My co-founders bought into it. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were able to enjoy some success. So I love hearing that you guys are of that mindset. Everyone really should be pivoting away from fixed input, fixed output to continual input, continual output. It's a really good point.
So what do you do to get people to want to work in that way? Because we're saying all these things that are really good for the organization, but like strategically for the organization, how do you get them to do this? And then tactically for the individuals, how do you get them to want to work in this way?
So I'm going to start with the tactical part.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it was actually, well, I won't say always. For the most part, a lot of the developers buy into it. Now, some will be very resistant until you can, start to show them the value. My first transition out from more project management to product management was easier because it turns out that developers don't like 50-page BRDs. They would much rather, the vertically sliced, smaller portions of what you want to do. And so in that aspect, it was an easy transition, but I've worked for organizations that, I was part of helping them transition. And the biggest thing I could say with getting them to buy into it is slowly building that trust. There was a lot of distrust, and then also slowly showing them the benefits of transitioning to doing it differently, and giving them a voice of, we're not going to spell it out and with every T crossed and every I dotted that it's open for conversation. We understand that there's better ways to do it. You as an engineer know better than me how to get something done faster and more efficiently. So from that standpoint, it's the best way for a team tactically. From a leadership perspective, it's also going to be showing them the benefit of working together and, aligning the goals and showing that, if we do it this way, you can actually see incremental progress more often instead of waiting till the very end to find out, is this what you wanted? So that's my experience.
Yeah, I think for us, it's a slow process, but it's all about building the trust with the clients. And that starts, in our case, by setting appropriate boundaries around how we're going to do the work, and having those discussions is like, well, we're not going to do it this way because of this. And so if you can start kind of debunking a lot of the inherent assumptions that your clients have, that helps as well, because then you can build up trust. Like, no, I know what I'm talking about. I have done this before. Can we try it in this small chunk? And then you just build that trust slowly, and then eventually, if you're successful, you can get to the point they're like, okay, I'll give you 6 months of budget. Like in our case, we want to start, can you give us 2 weeks of budget? So we'll try to build that trust like one sprint at a time, but you have to be super consistent, because both your developers are trying to learn a different way of working and your clients are. And so if when things get sticky, people revert right back to the old way of thinking. So in our case, you just have to be very consistent.
So earlier I heard it's not just about the people who are doing development or the product management group, but you end up bringing up all of the aspects of what product management means. I heard marketing, I heard sales, I heard these things, but I find that it gets into like HR, it gets into finance. Start telling me about like these partnerships inside my organization that I have to deal with with the product mindset. Anybody? This is a hard one.
I'll kick it off because I think a fairly unique background in terms of where product people typically come from. There aren't a lot that come from sales. It really is, in my experience at Zix, been the most beneficial to be overly communicative with every stakeholder and build relationships first and foremost. So build relationships with your finance stakeholder, your support stakeholders, your HR stakeholders, really every department that you'll end up working with, which typically for a product manager, depending on the size of the company, is going to be sales, marketing, engineering. But if we're talking about a company with 100, 200, maybe up to 500 people, you very well might be working with key stakeholders in support and deployment and client services and finance for approving pricing or approving promotions and product marketing, really every department under the sun. And so for me, the two big keys are being over communicative and being able to speak the language of each department. Don't talk engineering to HR, don't talk HR to engineering, but then also to build personal relationships with those stakeholders so that they like and enjoy working with you. I find that both of those initiatives has been very helpful for me.
I would maybe paraphrase that as empathy, because a lot of times because we're such a small company, those departments are external, or they're within our client's company. And so if you could just start with empathy, then you can kind of calm the tempers down and get to that actual conversation. But I like what Chris said, you kind of have to, somebody has to be a translator, because you have to be able to speak to those departments where they're at.
Yeah, translation starts with empathy. You're spot on. That's a great way to put it.
And Maggie, when I think of your own company, they don't get to be far away from you internally because you're a small company, so it all gets carried. And I think since you're the CEO, it ends up putting all of that connections, the final responsibility is yours to making sure those all touch in the right place, right?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to throw one more out, and then I'm going to open this up to questions that the audience may have. Tim, do we have? We do have questions from the audience. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to throw some of these out to the audience, but I want to go back into what do we do? Like, so one I want to put out is like some hard stuff on incentives. Like, how do you change the incentive program? Because on time, on budget, with all the stuff that I asked for, is that the right incentive program anymore? Or is it something else? Like, how do we incent our people to do this?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I wish I knew the answer. Absolutely. But I have a mentor who taught me very, very quickly that compensation drives behavior. And so I think it's exceedingly beneficial for HR, finance, or the compensation committee, depending on the way a company is structured, to be very strategic in identifying the way that you want to build, the way that you want to ship products, and then incentivizing the departments that are core to that in a way that aligns with the way that you want to build and the way that you want to ship.
Okay. How do you guys?
Yeah, I think it's important that you build trust with your team, that, you know, if there is a project that is coming up on a deadline that maybe requires them to put in extra effort, that either you also compensate that time that they have to put in later, or you figure out how to be better for the next time so you don't get into this crunch mode. I think building that trust is super important, because if a team continues to see you have the leadership, you know, jamming more work down their throat and pushing them to work a lot of extra hours, but those hours are never made up, or it happens for every project, then they begin to lose faith in that leadership.
I agree with that, especially the kind of compensation aspect. I know compensation is a big topic everywhere, but it seems like here, because we are a much smaller marketplace, we also have a brain drain problem, they call it. So anyone with an engineering background is more likely to move elsewhere to the coast or to Texas at this point, because they can get better paying jobs, better benefits at bigger companies. And so we have to compensate appropriately. But the other aspect that I see a lot of times is that for those engineers that stay here, they don't value themselves well enough, because, and I'm not sure why that is. And so a lot of our internal incentives have actually been have been focused on professional development, right? Because it's kind of interesting thing, like everyone talks about like Kansas as a flyover state or Nebraska as a flyover state, and there's some other kind of psychological aspects that those of us that still live here or choose to live here kind of deal with. And so for us, it's been around growing up a younger talent pool to be very professional and very and not only value their own skill sets, but then if they were to go to a bigger company, make sure that they can argue for their value.
Well, and I was thinking as you were speaking that it's difficult to bridge the compensation gap, especially in a market like we find ourselves in now. And so oftentimes you need to find other non-compensation ways to motivate people. And a couple of the techniques that I've seen some of my peers deploy, which I think are really, really great. Number one, I have a friend of mine that works in product at Facebook. And what she does before every big iteration or before she's asking people to build things is she likes to tie it back to their own lives. And she likes to show them how this solution that they're building would impact them personally. Granted, they're all Facebook users, so it's kind of a unique situation. But the point being that then the engineers have empathy for the users, not just the product people. And then when engineers can see the efficacy of the work that they've done on their end users, I've, at least in my experience, seen a sense of real pride. And that's something I think that can drive people to work harder, to be more mission focused or mission driven, and that can help align people. Another thing that I've seen some product people do, they're really, really good about tying a product or a project in a product to work on increasing sales or increasing retention, and then demonstrating that increase to the business, but then maybe not communicating that back to engineering to say, hey, look at the financial efficacy that you guys have had on this company with this effort. So I think tying that back and making sure engineering is well aware is also a really good thing.
Ty, I'd like to add one more thing to that. One thing I'm seeing with a lot of younger engineers is that they're valuing their time over money. And so that's something that we've had to learn to kind of adapt to as we work with younger engineers is, and the way that you give them that time a lot of times is giving them that flexibility to work remotely, because there's a lot of time traveling to and from work, being in meetings that maybe they don't need to be part of, getting distracted by drive-bys or walk-bys. And so we're finding that given that flexibility to work remotely, now that's not for everyone. You have to find the right candidates that you can trust to get the work done. Is also an incentive. It's because there's some great developers that are in Timbuktu that love living there, don't want to live in the city. And so they're willing to also take less money for that flexibility.
All right. So if I'm in a project state, be that I'm a project manager, maybe I'm a dev manager, a dev leader who's been assigned to just get projects done in some way, I'm going to stay where I do projects, and that's all that I want to do. And I want to, if I want to get started down this path on my own, I just want to get started. Give me a couple of things. If it's a book, if it's a video, if it's a thought leader to follow, give me something to get me started. Head me in the right direction.
Well, I would definitely start with the Lean Startup. I think Ty kind of called me out on that not too long ago. I had not finished that book, but now that I have finished the book, yeah, I could have read that 5 years ago and it would have really sped up my transition.
I kind of had that one ready.
Yeah, I've got it here too.
Eric Reese. All right, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's the go-to book to start out. I would also recommend attending any meetups. I know that they're mostly virtual now. I think that's a good source to learn, how others are doing it, what challenges they're facing, how they're overcoming those challenges. Joining on LinkedIn, you can find a ton of different groups where people will post different things. So just immersing yourself with, around other product managers.
Yeah, like community is the strong thing. Okay, cool.
Right.
Chris, what you got for me?
A book that I've read fairly recently that I think ties back to setting the right measurable goals, and that'll enact change to change the way that products are built, is a book called Radical Focus. Achieving your most important goals with objectives and key, I think I want to say. Yeah, it's a bit of a long title. Radical Focus, if you Google it, that'll bring it up. And it's doubling down on the OKR model that John Doerr enabled at Google and IBM, and I think brings a more product focus to the OKR model as opposed to an overall corporate focus.
I put, if I were to throw one out, I would put Inspired by Marty Kagan is one that I really dug, especially the second version of this book. I always thought it was going to be like a rah-rah, you can do it kind of book. And it is, but it's got more so, I felt like it laid out the plan for how to design a product-focused organization, which was, it had a lot of strategic value for me. So that was a cool one. All right, now I'm going to bring it down to, I'm going to bring it up to the larger organization. If I'm that person and I want to convince my organization that I have some major benefits from switching to in my mindset to this, give me a couple of things that you would say these are going to be some pretty high benefits that you'll get from just looking at it differently.
I think the one we usually go to is focus. The thing we see a lot of our clients struggling with is just too much multitasking, which means there's too little focus or we're not getting enough done. So bringing in a project mindset, especially when we're also suggesting that they use Scrum, the first thing we say is like, you can increase your focus and get where you want to go quicker.
Yeah. If people ask me, what am I doing? I have to say this or something like this because I don't know too many projects. Okay.
I would say being able to deliver value faster.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said this earlier, you know, not waiting till the very end of the project to figure out if you actually got it right, but incrementally bringing that value to customers, keeping them happy.
Yeah, and maybe
being able to ruthlessly do your job as a PM, which is to make sure you're on the pulse of the market and pivoting when necessary without waste. Right? If you're looking at it in a project mindset, you could be 3 months into a 6-month project and realize, well, we've really missed the boat here and we need to pivot. And you've got 3 months of waste, which could be a several $100,000 to several million to tens of millions dollar problem, depending on the size of the company. Right. And so ultimately what I've found is at the end of the day, it's the executive team that's making the decision, or the executive team with the approval from the board, or however you're structured. And so tying it back to quantifying dollars and cents is really, really powerful.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. We're going to open it up and let's take some audience questions and see what we got. So Tim, hit us with something.
So the first question is, can you highlight the critical considerations for a company that would like to make this transition, but they may not know where to start or where the sticking points might be?
My suggestion is that you do want to bring someone in that has the experience. If it's something that you know about and you've heard a lot of great things and you want to bring it to your company, it may not go over as well without bringing that experience with you, because it's not a one size fits all. You really want someone who can assess what that specific company situation is and work with them accordingly and be able to make the right adjustments as, they start to go one way and, okay, maybe that's not working quite well. And so they know from, based on experience that maybe we need to go left for a little bit and try something different. And if you have that, that's someone already, or you are that someone, then the biggest thing is bringing that value. Maybe you start small with your team and then you can start to show, look, this is all of the great stuff that my team and I have done. This is all the value that we brought in the last couple months doing it differently. And, what if we expanded that to another team and slowly grown it that way?
Yeah, and your experience at the C-suite of your company is going to be vastly different than the experience of like a PO or a PM, right? And so another thing it sounds weird when you say it, and I think I might get a grimace from Ty, but you have to let things fail. At a certain point, if you've made a suggestion and you've tried to quantify it, you have to let it fail. And the people that didn't accept it at the beginning will learn a hard lesson. And hopefully, if they're strong business leaders, they'll recognize that and then they'll pivot, right?
I think our seminal stories in our company is the one that everybody remembers and everybody tells. A lot of those things are around, yeah, we fell down when we did this. So I'm down. I want to throw out one as it stems from the thing that you guys were talking about earlier of empathy. but a lot of times we'll phrase it as politics, like, oh, you got to be worried about politics, but we're threatening the livelihood and success of individuals by making a change in a space where they've been expert to a space where they have no expertise or very little. And so just understanding what people are going to have to go through when they have to make this type of change. We got to understand that piece and make that easy for them and partner with them instead of call them someone who's an outlier or resistant, or all these inflammatory and negative phrases that we use towards people when they're nervous about change in a space where they've had stability for quite a long time.
I would agree with you, Ty, that, it's super important. I was one, several years ago that often was looking for that company that, politics didn't exist. I hated politics, but whether you call it politics or empathy or whatever, the fact of the matter is that it exists. And if you want to be successful, then you're going to have to learn to empathize and, be one with, the sales team. You may not, that was always sorry, Chris, but I hated sales, but they are what makes the company go round. And you have to understand that it's their job to bring in cash so that the company can continue to pay me. And so building those alliances and will make it easier to get on the same page and try to achieve the same goal.
And certainly there's kind of a wince when you say salespeople, especially on the engineering and R&D side, right? And I'm so used to that at this point that my skin is so thick. Don't worry about the insult. But what's really fascinating that I've learned, and whether you call it politics or empathy, it's selling. The very nature of selling is to understand what motivates someone and then align what you're trying to sell them with achieving that motivation faster, more effectively, whatever. And so really you need to do what my mentor always talks to me about doing, understand what drives their compensation, and then align what your change is going to do to improve the outcome of that compensation, whether it's them feeling efficacy in their job or them making more money or hitting their bonus or whatever. If you tie it back, they will champion it if they believe it, right? Just like any salesperson, you have to be good at it. If you're not, then they'll put you in that corner of, well, this is a silly idea.
I feel like we could probably go on to on this, like what are the sticking points? There's so many in this space. The thing that you just mentioned makes me bring up communication too. The concept of whatever the vision is, it goes all the way down to the person who may know it the least in the company, but the vision and the model for the business and whatever we do, whatever our purpose is, that being stated over and over again, all the way down, the company helps with that communication piece. Another one?
Sure thing. So the question comes in, are your organizations entirely product-based and there are no projects? Or if there are projects, how do these things intermingle?
Yeah, I'll field that one because we're feeling it right now. So our company for the last 3 to 4 years under new and very, very good leadership is focused on M&A as a core component of our strategy. We've got a really nice base of customers that's buying some solutions from us. And so we identified that we could buy into categories that are adjacent to that area. And so a natural byproduct of M&A is product integrations and company integrations. And I've found that at least within our organization, we have product management managing products like products, but then when there's a M&A deal where we're buying or we're partnering, oftentimes that can supersede every roadmap out there, subsume a lot of the resources, and be viewed as a project where there's a hard deadline. There's so much that needs to get done. It's communicated to the board, perhaps communicated to Wall Street if you're publicly traded like we are. And so it's very challenging, in my experience, as little as it's been, to manage that in tandem. Oftentimes a project will be bigger, perhaps more high-level facing, and take away a lot of the resources or the continuity that a product mindset provides.
Yeah, we struggle with that as well, especially when we're supporting multiple clients with multiple products at once. So that's a constant challenge for us. And so in our case, it tends to come down a lot to the time management to make sure you're increasing focus and decreasing multitasking. So we try really hard not to do any kind of development work that takes less than a sprint. So that way we can at least have the continuity of a sprint. That doesn't really help when we have our own internal projects that need to be done. And then we'll try to preserve focus for those by setting aside like a day. So we've done a lot of like code jams, for example. So it's not a whole sprint, but it's like a day. But in our case, it's anything that we can do to maximize focus has been helpful.
All right, Tim, let me know that we have there's a few questions out there, so I'll try to give us tighter time boxes and keep us moving into the questions. All right, Tim, throw another one at us.
So how important is it for products to be self-funding?
I think it's not important unless you're a one product company. If you have a portfolio, and I'd highly recommend everybody read Jeffrey Moore and start thinking about portfolio management using the Horizon model, where you have Horizon 1 products that's your revenue, that's where all your profit is, and you're using that to fuel this concept of Horizon 3, emerging products that you want to see if the market will adopt. And then if you can find one of those Horizon 3 products to cross the chasm from Horizon 3 into Horizon 1 by going through this transformational, what's called Horizon 2 phase, then that's really the way that you manage your business as a life cycle, and you can end up life products and continue moving down the path. But you're not going to be able to do that if you think about every product as a self-funding roadmap. The most successful companies will incubate ridiculously negative products, like Tesla, for example. The Model 3 was an insane amount of R&D, and there was no prior indication that it would be a really, really successful product. And now it's absolutely killing it, to the point where now Elon's moving on to the Cybertruck as his next big bet with Tesla, right? But certainly neither of those efforts was self-funding. And so I'd caution that unless you're a one product company and you have a portfolio of products, like I feel most SaaS companies do, you should really be looking at it as portfolio management, where your big products that create a lot of profit for you are the ones fueling the separate products. And you shouldn't resource accordingly. Just because a product has 90% of your revenue does not mean it should have 90% or even 50% of your resources, right? You need to balance out the resources between the products that are making your money now and the products that you expect to make you money tomorrow.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Chris, especially for new products. I mean, starting out of the gate, it's very hard to break even for the cost that you're putting into it as you build the customer base onto it. But at some point, you do become profitable, and perhaps this one product, like Chris was referring to, I think phase 3, or I can't remember what it was, number 3, and it gains that customer base and continues to grow. It maybe doesn't require as much support anymore. You still continue to maintain the application or whatever the solution is, and eventually it becomes profitable. The margins decrease, and you have hopefully moved on to other ones because you've become so profitable on this one now, and you also have this other one that's profitable. What else can we do as a company that's innovative, that maybe bridges these solutions together or just enhances on them? So I definitely don't think that you can start any product and expect it to make money to cover the cost of launching it.
Yeah, but well, and that's not to say though that there aren't going to be some products in your portfolio that maybe you can operate in a complete vacuum, right? Like we have a product at Zix that's been around for several years that's not high growth, but man, is it profitable. So it's really hard for us to just dump that product out. And so what we decided made a lot of sense was we could farm that R&D out to a third-party company. They could manage the roadmap, maintain it so that the product keeps working, and it can almost operate in its own little business unit. So really, you just need to look at your company goals and make sure that the portfolio management aligns. And it could be all Horizon 1 through Horizon 3 management, or a hybrid of that and independent silo management? It's really what makes the most financial sense for you.
Things like freeware and shareware would have never been born if that mindset was kept.
Yeah.
All right, let's do another one.
So if your internal processes are not, actively maintained, deliberately maintained, or improved using Agile, and you're looking to help an organization make this transition, how do you start there? How do you help an organization that is not actively thinking about their internal processes and to start making these sorts of changes?
We tend to refer to that as low-hanging fruit. So like if somebody comes in and says like, well, I mean, I have no idea what the dev team's working on, and they had 5 projects go in this week and none of them have been done, like that's low-hanging fruit. So you start with maybe a Kanban board, right? So you make some things visible. So that's where we tend to start, is just with the first thing they complain about, try to solve that problem if you can solve it. And then you just incrementally add on top of that.
Those things can be, that solution ends up being from the tactical problem that you have all the way up into a large strategic one, because I find out that in really large companies, no one has a clear view of what the big picture is either, or what we're doing, right? So making that stuff visible all the way up and down. What else?
All right, so we have another question, which is that if we have you seen products centered around a line of business rather than a singly developed product? And if so, what have the roadblocks been where they were making that work?
I'm sorry, I don't think I was understanding. It's centered around the line of business and instead of what?
Instead of a singly developed product. So instead of having just one particular product that you're developing, it might be we have this broader line of business. Is the question?
I think that describes our company pretty well. So we offer development services, we offer consulting services, we have training services. Those are all lines of business. Right. So I don't necessarily think of each line of business as a product unto itself, because they're all housed under the company. So in my case, my company is my product. But I think that if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think that'd be an example of that.
Yeah, and I would say the same for my company as well. Although we launched with, you have to start somewhere. We launched with a DIY tax product for individuals, and we continue to expand our line of business into the accounting side, supporting small businesses. And so we offer accounting services and tax services for businesses as well. But we look at it as still, I guess, because the company, it's under one company, and that's our line of business. So everything's around tax and accounting for us, and with our goal in mind of keeping it as simple as possible.
I start to get nervous when it's not just a line of business that it's associated with, but then it becomes a human's name that sits on top of that. Instead of the group talking about what they do or what value they create, we start to talk about that person's group, and there becomes ownership around that. And then we start to go into this place where each one of those starts to become like a little bitty independent company inside the larger company, and they're competing against each other in a negative way, not a positive way. That one's the space where it starts to scare me at. But the lines of business, as long as there's high communication and interaction between them for the bigger goal of what the company sees, then I think that's a win. Actually gives you some focus and excellence inside those smaller groups. But as soon as it starts to become something else and not about the big picture, I start to get a little bit nervous about it.
And I think as long as you formalize lines of business into business units with independent budgets and independent teams that just share resources like G&A, for example, that can be successful. And certainly you'll have the exact same budgetary fights that departments have right now, where I've got this budget that I need, marketing has this budget that they need, and maybe we butt heads over who's going to get that budget if we're all fighting over the same dollars. A business unit would be no different than a department in that case. But as long as it is separated so that it's not what I'd consider operational resource fight, kind of like what portfolio management is right now, where maybe my resourcing is competing against other products, but there's a dedicated resource pool that's an annual budget. That to me can be managed successfully.
Okay. All right, it looks like our time box is expiring. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming out and spending this time with us and giving your experience to the audience and answering these questions. I know there are so many more. This video, for the people who are watching, this video will be posted on our YouTube channel and other social media spaces. So I hope that you guys get to see that. Please connect to us, the names that you see up here. We love to talk about this stuff. It's what we do. Thank you guys very much. My name is Ty Crockett. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. So for our next couple of Lunch and Learn series, we're going to be talking about project delivery. Yeah, we still do projects because we have initiatives that need that. They have a specific goal and we have to get them done in a specific time. So we still do projects. And how do you do successful projects if you're still doing project-based work? And you can do project-based works inside products. And then we'll be doing exploring team performance. You can see the dates up there. If you want to know more about these or what other things are available, that's just 2 of the many that are coming and available. Then you can go to our site, improving.com/virtual-events and go check that out. We thank you for your time. I'm Ty Crockett, and I act as an Agile coach, a trainer, and a consultant in I don't know how many places. Thank you very much. See you later.